just the entire journey of your dissertation, right? Your PhD thesis, it teaches you so much about accepting failures, resilience, discipline.
Her Story chat series. I would like to take this opportunity proudly to introduce Dr. Ketki Tulpule, Senior Vice President, International Business Development and Strategy at Rx Propellant. Dr. Tulpule is a life science professional with a deep understanding of the pharma, biotech, CRO value chain, and over a decade of experience in industry as well as academia. She is adept in international business development, primarily in Europe and Japan, marketing, operations, and strategy for pharma services and products. Prior to Rx Propellant, she worked in pharma analytics at Excelra Knowledge Solutions. She holds a Ph.D. in Neurochemistry from University of Bremen, Germany, and 2 years of postdoctoral experience from Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, Pune. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thanks for that lovely introduction.
I know. So the first set of questions are pretty mundane. What made you get into science, Ketki? Because science is not something that comes naturally to most people. They want to avoid science and math. So what made you get into science?
Can I tell you the true story behind it?
Yes, please.
I'm a medical reject. And that is what made me get into science. So I always loved science, but I wanted to be on the medical side. Even in school, I enjoyed physics, chemistry, biology, the whole jazz. But my heart was always towards, becoming a medical doctor. But as fate would have it, I lost a seat in a government college by just 1 mark, which was, at that point when you are 16, 17, it's quite a bummer.
Yes.
So I had 2 options then, either to give it a shot again or to pursue my love of science in a different stream. And I chose to then go the second route, which was pursuing my bachelor's in microbiology. Now, thankfully, for me in Pune, there is a college called Garware College, which is really good for microbiology. And I applied there and I got in. The first semester, I have to say, I was still a little heartbroken over the fact that I was not in the medical school and I was, pursuing life sciences. But I actually started enjoying this. And it took me about a year to finally realize that this was my calling. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I enjoy doing, particularly biochemistry, which was one of the subjects that I had there. Right. And so that's how science happened for me. So the entire journey leading up to a PhD was not really planned initially, but I'm glad it worked out the way it did.
So what stage did you start enjoying it and said, thank God I didn't get into medicine. This is what I love. When was that transition?
I think this was about 6 months into my course. 6 months. So the first semester was still, kind of bittersweet during my bachelor's. But once I was over that grief of not getting into a medical college, I think that's when you're more looking at things more objectively. And that's when I realized that this is something that is, I should be thankful to be here.
Right.
Rather than feel like I was not left with any other option, I should be thankful that things worked out the way they did. Because this is actually my calling. I would probably not have enjoyed being a medical doctor.
We have all gone through this path and it's addictive. Even, I'm in the last quarter of my professional life. It's still very addictive for me. So I get up every day in the morning feeling the same way that I did 30 years back. So, it's funny. You are in the real estate company. And how are you applying your science skills to that? I know it's a company that's looking to build out facilities, anything to do with the life science industry. How are you applying your skills to that?
Right. So for me, of course, when it comes to the construction side, there's very little contribution that
Right.
I can have. But the biggest sort of advantage I have is to be able to connect with our end users beyond real estate. Because it's not actually the brick and mortar that we are building, but the power of that brick and mortar, which is what I focus on. And that power is building a cluster or a network of scientists, who are co-located in one region. And I'm glad Galvin has joined this chat right now, because I always have these conversations with him, since he comes from the UK, which is much more established when it comes to these biotech clusters. So we always have these chats to talk about how we can take some learnings from the UK and use them in India, because unfortunately in India, science still happens in silos. And I feel the fact that we are building all this infrastructure helps us bring these scientists together and bring that sort of network and the community that is required at the end of the day for innovation. So I play a role more on that side of real estate.
Excellent. I mean, there's one thought process that all this is a bubble. One day, right now we are so excited about startup. Everybody is doing startup, but 10 years from now, this is a bubble where people realize it's not that easy. What is your view of life science, healthcare life science in India, especially from the startups side? Yeah.
Right. I actually don't think it's a bubble for us. I think we are actually at a point where we are getting our due credit, which was lacking for the longest period of time. And I personally feel COVID has done its bit in this, because it's positioned us as innovators and as solution finders when the world couldn't, and in a frugal way. That frugal innovation is what sets us apart. And I think this is just the beginning. So even for us, from an RX perspective, when I look at the general investor sentiment globally, right? Everyone's looking at India. Everyone's looking at India because they know that this country has the potential. And our power today is the people, the scientists that we have. So no longer is India perceived as just a pair of hands that's going to do, whatever work is asked out of them, but it's also brains that come with those hands. And I think that narrative we see across, even with big institutional investors that are looking to invest in India, in real estate or in other avenues as well. I think this is just the beginning. It's more than just a bubble.
Yeah. How did you get here to, I mean, a traditional path would have been postdoc, faculty, or pharma industry. And I mean, this is a very new track, and that's very, very exciting. Our interns were very keen to understand how you made that decision, saying, I don't want to be an assistant professor. I don't want to be doing drug discovery, but I want to do this. So what made you make that, I think, a life-changing decision almost? Yeah.
Right. So after my PhD, and I spent quite a few years in Germany for my master's and PhD, where the most natural thing to do would be to stay put there, either in industry or academia or what have you. But I decided to come back to India after my PhD itself, because I wanted to give India a shot. I was worried that if I get too comfortable in Germany or in Europe, I may never want to try India, which has happened a lot of times, right, with a lot of people. Like I said, I made that move to India very early on after my PhD. And then I went to IEFR. I was pursuing my postdoc there, and clearly there were differences in the way science was done there versus what I was used to. So even that was a learning in itself. But I think what I was taken aback by was the level of bureaucracy that exists in academics in India, sadly so.
Yes.
And while I would have wished for things to be different, but at that point, at the end of my 2 years, I decided that I want to be in a more democratic situation, in a more democratic environment where you grow basis your merit, not basis who you know, which tends to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so I knew that if I have to be in India, academics is probably not going to be something that I want to pursue. So I started looking for opportunities in industry, and thankfully I got this opportunity with GVK Bio in their informatics unit. So they had just started their bioinformatics unit that used to provide drug repurposing solutions.
Right.
And they needed scientists to run analysis and build hypotheses on what could be a new use of an existing drug. So I joined that, and I was so positively surprised to see that the team was full of people with similar backgrounds like me who had moved back to India after their PhD and who wanted to, give India a shot.
Yes.
So it was a very interesting time. I was there in operations for about half a year. And then I thought I should be on the commercial side, I should give it a shot, because otherwise I'm going to be a scientist forever.
Yes.
And I found a lot of support with my boss, Dr. Nandu Gattu. He said, okay, I am going to put you in sales. It's going to be a journey, but I'll groom you to that point. But you have to unlearn a few things, because you don't lead with science, you have to lead with business.
Yeah.
So I took that up, and it was great because I felt that business development is a good way to really test the pulse of the industry in whatever geography you're in. And I was fortunate to have Japan as the geography. So that involved traveling to Japan, and there's also these cultural nuances that you learn. Now, thankfully, having spent some time in Germany, I was already aware of the fact that, there are always going to be these cultural sensitivities that you have to be mindful of.
Yeah.
So that's how my journey in business development started. And I did that for almost 5 years. And then I was thinking, what next? I can continue doing this, or I can look for a change. And that's when Vishal Goyal, who is the one of the co-founders of JV Ventures, which basically incubated Rx Propellant, he reached out to me and he said, hey, I have this role. Would you be interested in talking about it? And at that point, real estate sounded like a different world altogether, right?
Yeah.
And as a scientist, you cannot appreciate real estate because you're used to working, a lab is built out for you, it's fully functional, you go there and you do your experiments. So unless you have to build a facility yourself, you can't appreciate the work that goes into it.
Yeah.
But then we realize that it's not just the real estate, but the power of the real estate that we have to tap into. And in a place like Genome Valley, which already had a huge density of companies, so we're talking about 200 companies, and having our about 7 projects there, we thought this is a great opportunity for us to paint our business in the color of science. Which is what I did, because otherwise you have architects who are building all this, but how do you bring in that element of science and what you have to offer? So that's where the real estate bit started. And it's been almost 3 years now.
That's fascinating. I would never have thought to pivot towards what you did, but that's why I think leaders tend to lead the way. They kind of don't stick to a beaten path. And then one of the hallmarks of being a leader is hands. I think unlike most other countries where people start to outsource, I think India probably is the one where you get most bang for your buck for intellectual capability. And there's no language barrier either. So, one more question is, would you do this again? Like tomorrow, if I said, Ketki, here's $1 million, go do what you want. Would you do this, or would you say, whoa, I missed out on doing something else, now I can do that?
Well, I'm already on the path of doing something else. So I would definitely do that. So
Okay.
it's all about building on all the experiences you've had so far for them to culminate into something that lies ahead of you, right? So I'm already on that path where you are carrying those learnings with you and you're just improving your skills as a professional. So yeah.
But interestingly, another pivot,
Yeah.
another well thought out pivot. So that's amazing. It's not just that somebody called you and said, "Oh, okay, I'll do that," but this seems like a premeditated pivot, saying, "This is where the pot of gold could be, and that's where I want to go," kind of thing. Which is
Right.
really that's the clarity of thought needed for leaders, I think. So amazing.
So I'll
Yeah.
also tell you how that happened. So with Rx Propellant, I think I've been very fortunate to have interacted with a lot of companies that want to grow. And the one element that is always missing and that has been largely lacking in India is the support for startups. Of course, if you go by the incubators that are around, there's space that you can take up. Now, what is the quality of the space is another thing.
Yeah.
But startups need more than space. They need funding. They need mentoring. Mentoring on the business side. There are dime a dozen mentors on the scientific side.
Yep.
So we still don't have that rich ecosystem to make sure that startups are flourishing and doing well. We have very few success stories along those lines.
Yes.
So we see this as an opportunity because when you set up, so in a private equity setting, right? If you're building a fund, you cannot be complacent.
Yes.
It's very different from getting a government grant where you're not expected to give any returns. And today, most of these startups in India are running on government grants, where, sometimes it's okay to not have that fire in the belly because you have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
I was saying that the idea with this fund will be to hopefully create the big wins of tomorrow, right? The success stories that India would have on the biotech startup front. So we are very excited about it.
So let me move on to, in the last half hour or so, the situation analysis questions, which I think are pretty insightful in how leaders think. So let me ask you this. Tomorrow, if your boss called you and said, Ketki, I'm done, I'm going to retire. I know you're 4 levels below me, but I want you to run the ship. How would you react to that? Would you say, oh my God, this is not possible? Or would you say, let me think about it? Or what your reaction would be?
Well, of course, I would want to think about it, think long and hard on how I could take up that role. I wouldn't downright reject it because it's an opportunity for you to grow. Of course, at that point, you also have to be mindful of the fact that for someone who has, so many years of experience over you, it's going to be a journey for you to get to that level. So you have to be, aware of your own shortcomings enough to say it's going to be a steep learning curve for me as well. But I would definitely think about it and maybe in my head chalk out how I would make that my way to there.
Yeah.
Won't happen instantly though.
Yeah. So you're saying that you're not going to say no, but your answer would be, yeah, great, this sounds very good. Let me think about it and come back to you. And that think about it would be, how do I handle my peers or juniors? How do I, all of that thinking, right? I mean, you do a self-analysis, or what would you do when you say, I have to think about it?
Yeah, it's analysis of what that role requires, right? What that whoever is filling those shoes right now, what are their skills, what are their strengths, and how do I fare with respect to that? What skills do I have to sort of improve on? What are the things that, because I think it's a people management game at the end of the day.
100%.
More than anything else.
Yeah.
Because the hard skills can be learned. It's more the soft skills that's the real hard part. So you have to introspect more on that. The rest of the grooming happens on the job.
Yeah. So on that, what kind of leader are you? I mean, are you my way or the highway, or there are 2 or 3 For example, I don't lead by the book. I lead by the heart and try to be fair. What is your leadership style?
Right. My leadership style is more on getting my team up to speed, but then after I'm comfortable with the fact that they know what is to be done, letting them be.
Okay.
So I don't like to micromanage. I like to give them the task, and I like to also give them some space and time to deliver it.
Right.
Of course, there are some instances where time is of essence, but most of the times I like them to be able to develop that thought process, to be able to independently assess how they should deliver this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm more that kind of a leader.
That's great. So you're also grooming people then. By doing that, you're actually grooming next generation leaders. So that's great. Just a quick, so if you had to fire an employee in your team, which you will have if you have not, have gone through, we'll all go through that for whatever reason. I had to do it because somebody showed up drunk to work. And, in the US, showing up drunk is a serious problem. So how would you fire somebody? How would you handle
Right.
the
No, I've
situation?
also had to do that. I've also had to do that. But I had to do that because the person was not really enjoying the role. But at the same time, they were not really digging deep to see what would they enjoy doing. So at some point, I had to have the hard chat with them saying, you need to figure out what you want to do in life, because this is clearly not something that you're enjoying doing. And they were in very early stages of their career to just give in to, whatever job you have at hand. Because when you're in your, I don't know, when you're 26, 27, you're still too young to just give in to your responsibilities that are asked of you and say, okay, I'm just going to go with the flow.
Yeah.
So I had to have that chat. More so because I wanted them to do well in their career, if and sometimes this helps them in direction. And of course, it took them a while to understand this. It didn't go well, but on their last working day, they got me a sweet letter and a gift saying thank you. So I thought, okay, at least, at the end of it, the message has been driven home well. Yeah. And now they are on a path to success. They're doing really well. And it's very heartening to see that.
So you help them in a way. Looks like
that's what I would like to think. Yeah.
Well, if they are in touch with you, that means that they respect what you did for them. So I think those are if you see potential in an individual in your team, would you promote him or her 3 levels above and say, I see the next me in you, so I'm going to do this? And once you did that, how would you then tell the other team members what you did? It's a very tough decision. It's a very visible decision. It could have an impact on the morale of the whole of your team, but that's what's important. So, for example, if you're going to pivot to a different role, you'll have to have somebody fill in your shoes. And if you pick somebody who's 3 levels junior, how would you handle that?
That's a tough one, actually, because suddenly that person in the team goes from being a peer to a manager.
Yes.
And that overnight shift in role may not very naturally come with the kind of respect that should come with that role, right? Because suddenly friends you're having coffee with are reporting to you. And that I've seen these instances in our organization as well. It's always tricky. It takes some time for the dust to settle. But that's just human nature, I think. I've not seen a single instance where it all goes very smoothly, where people say, okay, I'm your friend today, but you're going to be my boss tomorrow.
Right. So you look at the bigger picture and say, net, this is better for the individual and the organization. So some degree of grievances are okay.
Are expected. And in the end, you have to look at what is meeting the objectives of the organization and your delivery as a team, right? So this is, I would say, the side effect.
Yeah. So this type of situation can happen where very junior people move up and your boss, or very senior people then report to you, and you have to learn how to handle it. So clearly the organization has a certain goal in mind, and that's why they're doing it.
And it takes a while, but then balance is restored in some way. So someone who cannot keep up with this transition will leave. It's survival of the fittest, right? Those who are okay with this will. But I think organizations need that sometimes as well. Because that also, in a way, shows the strength of character of your team. I think that is very important, because that lets you know if your team has the same buy-in for the bigger objective of the organization or not.
Totally agree. I mean, 100% that. Do you have any role models? And if so, do you use them? Like, I don't know, I'm just giving an example. I don't know, Abdul Kalam, is he your role model? I'm just, and how do you use, we all have, I mean, I have role models that, for me, it happened to be my dad, who was a scientist, and Dr. Reddy, who used to be my boss. And, you know, I would often think about how they handled a certain situation. So do you have any role models? Are you a believer? And then how do you use them?
For me, my role model would be my previous boss, I would say, Dr. Nandu Gattu. For one reason, that he was, and this is something that I still need to learn, he connects with his team at such a personal level that, you know, that bond is, of course, he's a tough taskmaster when he has to be. But he is, even when he had a team that was 80 people strong, he used to check in on his team to make sure they are okay, everything is fine, you know, they have no issues. And even beyond work, he used to be always there if they needed some help, some support. So for me, he is a big role model, because I look at him as a boss with a very high EQ, which is very important. And I can be, sometimes at work, I'm all about work. So, you know, that's something that also comes with a bit of training. I think it doesn't come very instantly. So that's actually something that I want to imbibe in me, and I hope that I can do that.
So are you still in touch with him? Do you call him and say, this is happening, how should I handle it? Or it's just, okay.
Yeah, I always, I call him up every few months. We have chats. I tell him what's going on and what's next, and just to get some idea from him. And he's always encouraging. He says, go for it. In fact, it's a funny story. So when I was with my previous organization, 5 years in, we have these appraisal discussions, right? At the end of every year. So the appraisal discussion that we were having was not really about my performance, but him telling me that I should now figure out what the bigger picture for me is going to be. You know, performance and everything is fine, but where does this role take you next? You know, you have to look at that, because you have a long way to go, and you shouldn't confine yourself to your KRAs and what is expected out of you, but how do you push those boundaries? And that's fantastic, because it's not very often that you get bosses like that.
True. My last question is, you think doing a PhD has helped you, or would you have gotten here even without a PhD? Because you're not doing hardcore PhD stuff.
PhD definitely has its benefits, because just having that doctor title in front of your name, it immediately warms up scientists to you, which I would imagine would be otherwise. Sadly so, but that is the story. The other thing is just the entire journey of your dissertation, right? Your PhD thesis. It teaches you so much about accepting failures, resilience, discipline. because that's the first time when you are working independently and you're accountable for your own work. Nobody else is.
Yes.
I think that period of my PhD taught me so much about myself as a person and what how strong I was or not. I think those learnings I carry with me even today.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, being able to take many different thoughts and collate them into something that you can defend against superiors, that's a huge lesson in learning, It also a little bit of make sure you don't step on other people's feet. The external examiner has an ego, your boss has an ego and all that. So you got to manage all of that for about 4 to 5 years of your life. So I think it's a great experience. Not necessary, but if you can do it, I think it's a great experience. I completely agree with you. Yeah. Yeah. We are around 9:15, which means we have another 15 minutes. I want to throw it open. Any questions? And then I'll wrap up in the end. But Kriti, I know you had a question, so you want to go ahead and ask?
Yes, sir. Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, my question is that biotech industries in India are often associated with these cities, Hyderabad and Bangalore. But my interest, however, extend beyond these urban centers. Whether in future we can extend these industries to rural places also.
Right. So, like you rightly pointed out, it's Hyderabad and Bangalore that get prominence. Of course, there's Mumbai, there's Pune as well.
Yes.
When it comes to rural, see, the infrastructure itself, the setup, the ecosystem is largely missing, because of which it might take many, many years before we can set that up. But one thing is that everyone now appreciates the fact that talent, scientific talent in India is not restricted to the big cities only. And people are looking at the let's say the tier 2 cities, because that's where you again have abundance of talent, because you have good universities, good research institutes there. So we can see that happen, but it's going to take its own sweet time, I would say.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
And could you face any challenges like gender partiality?
Excellent. Gender-based challenges,
wow.
have you faced any? I know. That's $1 million question.
I think that's an amazing question, but I have to say that the field of science is more of an exception, because you actually have more female scientists than males, at least in the setups that I've been in.
Yeah.
And the field of life sciences in general is not tipped towards one gender or another. I think, which is great, which is a very different situation in other domains. For example, financial services, it's male dominated. But in science, it's a different story, and I have never faced any sort of discrimination just based on the fact that I'm a female scientist. So I think you wouldn't face any either. So, and it makes me very proud to say that this bias does not exist, at least in our field, in India, also outside India for that matter.
Yep, totally agree. Excellent question, Beniha. $1 million question. A lot of people would be hesitant to ask that question, so that's a good one. Dipshika, I see that you have a smile on your face, so you have a question, please.
Oh, hi, ma'am. I hope I can ask some like personal philosophies. Do you believe in fate? The decision you made you think it's good? I made it right. You think the decision is because of fate or your like determination in the field?
That's a very nice question. I never thought about it. So thanks for throwing a curveball. I don't think your journey is a function of fate. It's about being aware of the opportunities that exist around you and being bold enough to seize those opportunities. That ultimately defines, what journey you're taking. So one thing is you always have to keep your eyes and ears open to what's happening around you, because you never know. So if I had to look back 15 years and at that point, if someone said, okay, 15 years from now, you're going to be in real estate, I would say, no, it doesn't make sense. But just because you keep your eyes and ears open to opportunities and you see how your strengths will play into those opportunities, you would be amazed at how your professional journey also sort of takes shape. So no fate for me. I think it's just about being right place, right time sometimes. If not, then just making sure that you're making the right choices.
Okay, ma'am. Even if we are bold enough, even if we are bold enough, still we face some compromise in work balance life. So how to make it success without getting any compromise in balance?
I think, Deepshika, I might be a little caught here, but I think early on in your career, there is no substitute for hard work. You have to put in those efforts in. And I know a lot of people would want to slaughter me right now because the new age thinks that there has to be, work-life balance. Of course, there has to be a work-life balance. You can't just work. But there is, at least in the formative years of your career, there is no substitute for hard work. So instead of looking at it as a balance between how many hours I get for myself versus how many hours I get, how many hours am I putting into my work, you have to look at it as an opportunity to absorb and learn new things. I think that is the way to look at it.
Yeah, great question. Deepshika, I just want to give you an anecdote based on your question. The reason I am so passionate about IEFR is my mom was a scientist who had enrolled into Ph.D. This is way back, obviously. And then me and my brother, we are twins, we're born. And she figured that she couldn't do her PhD, so she gave up PhD. And she would often say, I wish I could go back and do this, I wish. In those days, work-life balance didn't exist. If your in-laws told you, stay at home and raise the kids, that's what. But I think what I'm hearing, the generation is changing, and you have to make the tough calls. There is not an easy, so. Yeah, she, till the last day, she was always like, I wish I had done it. And, that's, I don't know, so. That was a whole different generation. This is a different generation. So totally agree with Ketki's answer that you have to put in the hard yards and balance it. Initially, it will be tough, but once you go over that, I think it becomes easier. It's never going to be, easiest, but it's going to be.
How do you deal with the negative environment in your professional life as well as personal life?
I think dealing with negative situations requires you to use the non-work hours that you have doing something that you really like to do. I think that is a great way of resetting and rebooting, because you're always going to have situations which are tough, right? Situations that you don't particularly enjoy being in, but then taking some time off to do something that you really enjoy doing. So example, for me, it's traveling. So me and my husband, we love traveling. Just doing that once every few months helps you to kind of refresh, re-energize, and brace yourself for any negative situations that you encounter later.
Ketki, it is excellent discussion that we had. Actually, I really thoroughly enjoyed the discussions and the way you portrayed. So one thing that you have been working with many startups, I think you have seen multiple startups working in and around in your time. So have you seen anything? Is there any root cause that we have understood for the failure of many of the startups? As you said, rightly said, very few are lighting it. Correct.
The root cause I see majorly is the imbalance between the scientific merit of your idea and the commercial merit of your idea. Because a lot of startups are from people who've come fresh out of academia, who may not understand the business side of science really well. So that's where a lot of great ideas fizzle out. So, for example, there are a lot of startups that want to bring the next cancer treatment to patients, which is a great idea. But we all know how long that journey is. We all know what kind of investment that journey takes. So then the thing that you should focus on is, how do I mitigate that risk of running out of funds? How do I find the right partners? How do I find the right collaborators? And usually what happens is, ideas that come out of academics, they tend to partner only with academicians. So which is again, brilliant science, but not so much on the business side. So that's where I think we still have a long way to go.
Rightly said. Yeah, I totally agree with you. So when you have a startup, so you can actually collaborate with many people, right? Like business people who has got such knowledge, because as you said, like academicians will not have this, business thoughts. They always talk about the only science or the concept. So how to commercialize is the big question. So how do you recommend them to find such collaborative people to lead them to a business angle?
Right. So people like Uday, for example, right? Brilliant scientist who's been in the industry for so long. Mentors like him are what startups should be looking up to, because mentors like him are going to bring that balance between the quality of your science and also the commercial viability of whatever it is you have to offer. So finding these veterans of it, sorry, Uday, I think I'm making you sound very old by calling you a veteran, but for me, that's what you are. So finding these veterans from industry, particularly from the Indian biotech industry, is very important, because they are more than happy to share their journey. They are more than happy to even contribute without expecting much in return, just because they want to see these startups in India succeed. And I have met a lot of these guys over the past few years. And I always encourage startups to go and have conversations with them, because they can put a lot of things in perspective for you.
Totally, yes.
I do agree with Uday. So you have been great asset to the many startups. I have been saying it.
News. So this is somebody who understands the game. I'm sure. He's so.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we need more gopis in India. We really need more gopis in India.
Yes. Again, the clarity of thought. I mean, the reason I'm collaborating with him is, largely for the fact that he's able to assess a situation and make a decision not based on emotion, but based on reality, which is very important.
You're right. Yeah, absolutely.
Gal?
Yeah, mine wasn't really a question. It was more a sort of observation. It was a theme that's run through a lot of the sort of conversation. It's around developing relationships and building that network. And I think that's kind of fundamental to kind of everything we do. Ketki kind of spoke passionately about mentorship, and I think we all need mentorship, but we need mentorship from different sources. And I think that everything we do is all about canvassing opinion, getting guidance, seeking a different way of thinking, and there's the pace of science quickens, it gets more complicated, there's intrinsic links with other disciplines. That network and that access to different thoughts, different skill sets, and knowing when to draw upon those is becoming more and more fundamental in every way of life, and kind of building those relationships that are proper relationships. They're not just transactional or commoditized. They're proper personal relationships, and building those at every point of your kind of career is fundamental. I think that's a theme that's kind of ran through all the discussion, and that's what I'm kind of very privileged to be have the relationship I got with Ketki and her business, and I learn a huge amount from those interactions and her perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the last sentence you said, I learned a lot through her interactions. That's very telling, right? If you have to grow, you have to learn every day. You just can't say, I'm now 60 years old, I know everything I need to know. It really doesn't matter to me what anybody else says. But I think that's a very, very important thing you said is keep learning and learn it from whoever and whatever that you can, whether it's an intern or a VP or doesn't matter. So yeah, that's excellent.
Just to add to that, Uday, just
Yeah.
if I can add to that. So we recently had our offsite, right, in Bali. The oldest member of our family there is Mrs. Farzana Dohadwala. She is a very well-known educator in India. She's 74.
Wow.
And her energy is so infectious. So in one of the conversations that we were having, she said, you know what, I always tell my students, and these are very young students, right? Secondary school, in their formative years. So she said, I only tell my students one thing, which is you have to be lifelong learners, because learning never stops and learning should never stop. You know, you should have that hunger in you to try and learn new things all the time. And it resonated so much with all of us there, because she's leading by example, even at that age. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, I have to add one more anecdote. You know, Dr. Reddy, Anji Reddy, was going to pass away in 6 weeks. He had cancer. We all knew that. Him and I were sitting. He had a huge backyard, and he was sitting there. He noticed a new flower or something. He said, "Do you know what that is?" I said, "No." He called somebody, gave, and said, "I need to know about this flower, every little thing." So the quest for knowledge and quest to learn, exactly what you said. You know, I mean, in his case, not only was he so successful, he was going to pass away in 6 weeks. I mean, the physicians had said that, but yet that desire to learn, yeah, it's amazing. So that's what separates their DNA from people who could have said, I don't know what, get rid of that flower, you know, it smells bad or whatever. But he chose that. So 100% right.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm just want to reiterate what IEFR does, and then Deepshika is going to thank you. Ketki, we also need your address just to send you a little thank you letter. So
Sure.
if you can send it to me, please, that'll be great. Home address preferably, yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Galvin, Ketki also knows, already knows this. I am, you know, I've been around the blocks a few times. I'm a drug discovery scientist. And we just started this foundation called Indira and Eshwar Foundation. This is in my parents' name. They were both scientists. And the whole idea is to educate, train young women scientists in translational research, leadership, and entrepreneurship for 6 months. And it's a fully paid program. And, you know, there's not that many leaders in, women leaders in Indian science. As Ketki is one of the few ones. If I had to look around and say how many leaders there are, out of 100, there would only be 10, right? So I want to, I mean, I don't think I'm going to change that, but I want to have people get a shot at being there. So that's what it's all about. It's right now, it's not for profit. We are working, and I also want to show them cutting edge science. So they're working on a vaccine project, which yeah, and a second one is related to stem cell. They're doing hands-on work and all of that. So it's exciting. And we chose these 3 out of, we had 70 applicants, and then Sharanya had to whittle it down, and we interviewed and all that. So every 6 months, we're going to keep getting 3 to 5 new people.
I'm very happy to thank everyone. On behalf of IEFR and attendees of the Her Story and interactive chat session, I extend my sincerest gratitude to you for being with us and generously sharing your valuable knowledge. Thank you, Ms. Ketki. Your path as a female entrepreneur in the life sciences is a highlight of your passion, expertise, and dedication in the field, our life science field, which have left an everlasting impression on everyone. As an intern, we are very inspired by your messages and your answers. Your answers not only enlightened us and also ignited a spark enthusiasm of the possibilities within the life sciences and beyond the life sciences related to entrepreneurship. Thank you for once again. We look forward to for the future collaboration with you, ma'am. I also want to express my heartfelt thanks to our CEO and mentor, Dr. Uday sir. It is through his constant support and leadership that we are able to come together for this inspiring chat session. I also want Dr. Gopi Kadayala for his continual support in our research. And I also want to thank our audiences for asking the thoughtful questions and actively participating. Your curiosity and engagement added depth to our discussion, making the event more valuable. Thank you for being more enthusiastic. And last but not least, I thank you all for your presence and contributions have made a significant impact, and we are grateful for the positive energy you brought to this interactive session. Thank you. Have a nice day for everyone.